Sword Art Online in real life. Are you guys ready to full dive? Because we're closer than you might think. But before you take out those swords again to clear all those floors, let's break it right down for you. Now in our last video, we talked about how the main character Kirito uses his headset, the Nervegear, to full dive into Sword Art Online. And how close we already are to stimulate all our senses. But how close are we to full dive into Sword Art Online? Especially with the recent news from Neuralink and Valve that are working on brain-computer interfaces that are coming out soon. But to answer that question, we have to look at how full dive works in Sword Art Online. Now, as we can see in Sword Art Online, is that Kirito puts on his headset called the Nervegear and closes his eyes to full dive into Sword Art Online. Now at this moment, the headset blocks the signals that are going towards his body. Now what this means is that while he moves his arms and legs in virtual reality, in real life they don't move. And besides just blocking the signals towards his body, at the same time, the headset also sends signals to the brain to stimulate his senses, like vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. And yes, we got all of them. Now in Sword Art Online, it was Akihiko Kaiba who created the full dive technology and called it the Nervegear. And he released it in May of 2022, which is less than a year from now. And that's crazy. Just imagine that Sword Art Online in real life will happen in less than a year. If you are just as hyped as I am, then show it by subscribing to this channel. But alright, back to the Nervegear. Now while Akihiko Kaiba was the creator of the full dive technology, it was actually the company called Argus who produced the Nervegear headsets. And there was one important thing that was in the headset that changed the story of Sword Art Online. And that was that the headset was using high density microwave signals. Now besides just creating the full dive technology, Akihiko Kaiba was also the maker of Sword Art Online. And after full diving into SAO, it turned out that there was no logout button. And this is how Akihiko Kaiba intended Sword Art Online to be. And this would mean that if your health bar would reach 0 and you would get a game over, that also would mean that the headset then would send microwave signals directly to your brain and also causing a game over in real life. Now on top of that, the headset also had an internal battery, which meant that if you would take it out of the plug, it wouldn't just shut down so that you could take off the headset and log out. And it would actually use the battery that is inside the headset. This also gave the players the time to go from their home to the hospitals. But taking away this dark side of the Sword Art Online Nervegear, if we want to see how close we are to creating a Nervegear in real life, and of course without the dangers that it had, we have to look at 3 important factors. Nervegear does 3 main things. It reads the signals that are coming from the brain, it sends signals to the brain, and it blocks the signals towards the body. Now how close are we to making those 3 things in real life? To start off with reading signals from the brain. The biggest company that is working on this right now is Neuralink, and they recently came out with a lot of news. Neuralink is a company from Elon Musk who works on brain-computer interfaces, and they do this through the use of a device that they call the Link. Now what this device does, that with the tiny wires it can read the signals that are coming from the brain and then translate them towards the computer. And they recently came out with a huge breakthrough in which they showed off a monkey that has one of these Neuralink implants and who can control a dot on the screen by only using its brain. And this might look very simple, how the monkey is moving a dot from one point of the screen towards the other point of the screen. But the use case behind this is insane. Because this means that right now, the implant is taking the signals from the brain of where the monkey wants to move this dot. At the same time, this signal is translated into the computer and sent back towards the dot itself on the computer screen. This basically means that the monkey is controlling this dot with just his thoughts alone. Now to make it even more crazier, in the same demonstration, we see that the monkey is actually playing a game of Pong with only using his brain. Now what this means is that we have the technology to read the signals that are coming from our brain. That being for vision, hearing, smell, taste or touch. All of these senses we could technically registrate. Now what this means, that if we would be in Sword Art Online, we could be thinking that we're walking forward. And just the thought of us thinking it actually makes our character move forward. Now this is of course amazing for movement. So reading signals from the brain should be possible. And Neuralink is advancing so fast, where we can see their last year's product compared to the product they have now being a difference that's night and day in such a small time period. Now for a second thing that we needed to make Sword Art Online in real life was being able to send signals back to the brain. And even this is possible. Going back to the Neuralink, it turns out that besides just reading the signals from the brain, Neuralink is now also able to send signals back to the brain. Now what this means is going back to our first example, where I think about walking forward and where the Neuralink then translate this into the game of me actually walking forward. Then I might see someone who is playing on their guitar. Now the Neuralink could then send signals back to my brain and actually make me hear the sounds of that person playing guitar, even though that person is not actually there in the real world. So this means that besides just reading the signals, it could also send the signals back to the brain and thereby making the stimulation of vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch possible without needing stimulation from the outside, but by sending the signals directly to the brain. But there's one big problem, and that is the precision. Now, reading signals can be very precise, like thinking about up, left, right, and down, and can be translated directly into these movements. But sending signals back and stimulating them needs a lot of precision. And when we look at our senses, some of these senses need more precision than others. And the biggest problem for this is with our vision. Because when you send a signal from the Neuralink back to the brain, it doesn't just stimulate one neuron, but multiple neurons at the same time, if not thousands. Now, while for smell and taste, this wouldn't be such a big of a problem if you taste something that is a bit more salty or smell something that smells stronger than was intended. But with vision, this would mean that you would get a blurry or inaccurate image, almost like looking at a very old school, low resolution display. And this is especially a problem because vision is one of the most important things make virtual reality immersive. So yes, we can read signals from the brain and we can send signals back to the brain. But there are still a lot of problems with this, though we could make some trade-offs. We could, for example, stimulate touch, taste, smell, and hearing directly from a headset to the brain, while we could still have high-resolution screens for our vision. So this means it's far from perfect to be actually used to Fulldive into Sword Art Online. And we have one more, that is blocking the signals that are going directly to your body. Now, as of this date, there is no safe way of blocking motor functions like moving your arms and moving your legs for a temporary time. Now, this doesn't mean it isn't possible, because this is also what we do while we sleep. When we have a dream, we move around in our dream while our body in real life doesn't move at all. So if we could find a way to somehow induce this sleep state, then we could manage to block out the signals towards our body without harming our body itself. But that has yet to be achieved. Now, besides Neuralink, there's also other big companies like Valve working on brain-computer interfaces that don't need an implant. These brain-computer interfaces are more like EEGs that could be placed on top of your head instead of needing an implant. The problem with this though, that with this technology we can only read the signals that are coming from the brain and not send signals back to the brain itself, like the Neuralink does. But we know that Valve is working very hard on this, and they might already release a virtual reality headset that has a brain-computer interface built into it as early as next year. But this means that if we look at the big picture, is that it is already possible to read signals from the brain, send them to the brain, and hopefully it will also be possible in the near future to safely block the signals that are going to our body. But there's also a bad side. Right now, if we want to send signals to the brain, it would mean that we need an implant for this. And on top of that, this device could be sending signals to the brain without you knowing about it. But besides the dark side of it, there's also a beautiful side. Think about, for example, about the possibilities of people that are blind or can't walk. Now, if we could make Sword Art Online in real life, because of sending signals directly to the brain, these people would be able to walk again and see again in virtual reality. And that would be amazing. Now, if you like Sword Art Online, then show it by subscribing to this channel. And don't forget to leave a like on the video and let me know in the comment section below if you would full dive in Sword Art Online if it was possible in real life.